Epilogue. "What is that?" shouted Jonathan. The bright flash of light had caught his attention in the forest. "Let's find out," laughed Sig as he rushed toward it. "Your wives will be upset with you if it ends up being dangerous," said Lizard with air quotes. "Come on, Victor," said Lucas as he chased after Sig. "Someone with common sense ought to be there just in case." Victor smiled as they rushed toward the source of the light. Aspen leaves and pine needles crunched under their feet as they ran through the woods. The afternoon sun shined brightly above them, and a cool breeze helped keep them from being overheated. There was a loud shriek above them. "Sam," called Jonathan, "what do you see?" The red-tailed hawk circled high above. "It's obviously not food," said Lucas. "Sam would have been all over that." "Victor," shouted Sig as he came to a skidding halt at the top of a hill. "What?" shouted Victor. It was only a few seconds before they all arrived at the top of the hill and saw a man in a shining white cloak lying down between a couple trees. "He looks like you," whispered Jonathan in shock as he turned to Victor. "What do you think, Lucas?" asked Victor. "I don't know," replied Lucas. "I've never seen anything like it." Victor cautiously approached his other self. "He's wearing a bunch of keys," said Victor to the others as they approached behind him. There were 10 mirrored keys on a chain about his neck. "Keys?" said Sig. There was a brief pause as they looked at one another. "I wonder why." Victor cautiously reached down and touched the arm of the unconscious version of himself. There was a blinding glow and a blast of wind that threw everyone into the air. In that instant, Victor saw in vision a version of his life where he was born in a time of ruin. He saw the divine keys and their adventures. He saw how he fell in love with Jennifer Cedar. He saw the betrayal of Daniel Young. He saw the failed attempt to change time and how the archdemon nearly destroyed them. He saw their journey to the ancient past and the brutality of the demon lords. He saw the sacrifice of his friends and his final plea to the Herald of Time. Then he flew backwards and slammed against the ground. "Victor!" called Lucas. They rushed around him to see if he was hurt. As he opened his eyes, there was another bright flash of light. "What was that?" shouted Jonathan. "The other Victor disappeared," said Sig in shock. Victor strained to get up, but darkness clouded his vision, and he slipped out of consciousness. When Victor awoke, he was in his bed. As his eyesight focused, he perceived a beautiful blonde woman sitting on the edge of his bed. "Jennifer?" whispered Victor. "No," replied the woman, "although she does look very much as I do." "Herald of Time," whispered Victor. She nodded. "Yes, but call me Rachel," she said. "Rachel," he whispered. She smiled widely. "You and your friends are rare," she said. "You showed me something I had not seen in a long time." "You allowed me to see what I never would have known," said Victor. "You sent that other version of me here." "More than that," said the Herald of Time. "There is a reason your existence was not completely erased. The Archangel Michael truly found a treasure on Earth when he discovered humanity." "You are very kind," said Victor with a smile. "There's a reason that you look like him," she said. "What?" asked Victor as he sat up. He recalled the confusion as to why he was appearing in visions of his companions, and he eagerly waited for the answer. "When you showed up in my presence, I thought it was a cruel irony," she said sadly. "I looked at you and saw what I believed to be Michael's folly, a painful reminder of my loss." "I'm sorry," said Victor. "Don't be," said Rachel. "You opened my eyes. I looked closer. When he battled the archdemon, he knew that he could not simply change the past. Everything would have to be undone." "Yes," said Victor. "So he sacrificed himself," said Rachel. At first I believed that he split his essence between the prison of the divine keys. Ben Smith believed that too. Part of him did go into the prison to bind the archdemon for 1,000 years. Part of him did go into each of the 10 divine keys that he forged. But there was another part of him that stayed right there. "What?" whispered Victor. "What happened to it?" "It stayed there for a long time," said Rachel. "For centuries it remained on that spot. Eventually the destroyer came, and the world was changed. Humanity was relegated to scraping survival out of what was left of the earth, and many humans became cruel, bitter, and sadistic. But not all." Rachel paused and smiled as she looked into Victor's eyes. "Your parents were married and settled into a small community," she continued. "A community that was built on that very spot. In fact, it was because of your parents that he chose you. Because of them, you endure here. Even in the destroyed world, there were husbands and wives that loved one another and committed to remain true to one another. But your parents were wholly devoted. I cannot believe I did not recognize it immediately. But Michael did." "What did he recognize?" asked Victor. Rachel took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "The deep love and fierce loyalty that your parents had reminded him of one who is dear to all angels. My point is that a part of Michael's soul recognized that love and latched onto it. Consequently, part of Michael lives on in you." "But that world no longer exists," said Victor. "Time was changed." "Certainly some things have changed, but perhaps not all," she said as she laughed softly and pointed to the table next to his bed. "Some bonds truly can last for better or worse, for rich or for poor, in sickness and in health, in a time of desolation or in an age of beauty. Some bonds were meant to be." Victor's eyes widened as he then saw 10 mirrored keys. He whirled back to the Herald of Time, but found that she had disappeared. He cautiously reached out and touched the key of Origins, determined to learn what had happened. In a moment he saw Stephanie Mason and Samuel Godwinson riding the large white horse Gideon together. His eyes widened as he saw a diamond ring on Stephanie's finger, and he smiled when he heard her speaking. The suffering she had endured under Kappa 16 had never occurred. His vision changed and he saw Erica and Peter Kingsley living happily together, never having to deal with the insanity of Joshua Beckman and raising their daughter Amber in peace. He saw Daniel Young getting arrested for experimenting on patients with a Dr. Zoe Hayes, who he recognized as a much more human Zeta 28. Seeing justice administered brought a smile to Victor's lips. His vision changed again, and he saw his parents living together in a small apartment community, caring for a small baby boy. It was him. Suddenly, the key of Origins paused the scene and rewound time quickly. He could see other families living in the apartment where his parents had been. He watched as it appeared the building was being deconstructed, even though he knew he was watching time going in reverse. He watched as the sun rose and fell, and as seasons flashed quickly. Eventually the speed slowed, and he saw a huge cloud of smoke. The scene moved quicker in reverse until he saw Michael standing next to Jennifer in the same spot of earth where he had been raised. The place where the Archangel sacrificed himself to save humanity had eventually become the site of Victor's first home. The vision blurred ahead and again showed his parents putting a baby boy in a crib. There was a bright flash of light in the room, and his parents rushed back in, but could not find anything wrong. His jaw dropped in amazement. It was just as Rachel had said. The love his parents had for one another and for him had not changed in this age, and that fragment of soul from the Archangel Michael had found a warm, peaceful, and familiar sensation in that little apartment. It had been because of the love of his parents that he had been chosen. The vision continued to show him details behind the lives of his friends, and of course some of the details he already knew. Row 82 was now Police Detective Robert Jones and labored to serve and protect in their community. Kirana and Jonathan had been happily married for about 5 years. They owned a tremendously popular restaurant where Jonathan's cooking was frequently honored. The quality and the flavor of the food was obviously important, since Kirana's people skills were not very good. Her skills with Jonathan's red-tailed hawk Sam, on the other hand, were quite impressive, and their hunting hobby had brought them even closer together. Chloe Baldwin had not been born in the distant past, but in Victor's time, apparently exchanging times and places with Stephanie Mason. Chloe and Sig West had been married for about 3 years. Lucas and Lizard were partners in an energy business that was quite successful. Of course, even without having lived in the wake of ruin, Lucas was extremely bright, and Lizard was fast and efficient. Jennifer had been born only a year after Victor, and had a normal childhood, free of the influence of demons, destroyers, and slavers. She and Victor had been happily married for about 1 year, and they both felt as though they experienced love at first sight. It had seemed to everyone that knew them that they had been destined to be together, even though it had taken some time for them to gain the courage to confess their feelings to one another. Having seen the effort to which the Herald of Time had gone in order not only to preserve them, but to help them find happiness, tears of gratitude welled up in Victor's eyes. "Victor?" came a voice from the other room, ending his vision. "Are you okay?" "Jennifer?" asked Victor. She smiled and came into the room. She had a white top and dark blue jeans. Her hair was tied up into a golden ponytail that swayed back and forth as she approached Victor. "Who were you expecting?" she asked. "Oh, I don't know," said Victor with a smile as he wiped his eyes. "What's wrong?" asked Jennifer with concern as she reached out and ran her fingers through his dark hair. "Do you ever get the feeling that life is better than it should be?" he asked. "You want life to be miserable?" asked Jennifer in a confused tone. "No, of course not," he said. "It's just, things are actually pretty good. We don't have demon worshippers or augments or archdemons." Said Jennifer, unsure what to say. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I'm just saying that I don't think that all of the good things we have in life are free," said Victor. "You're getting all philosophical," said Jennifer as her eyes narrowed. "Sorry," said Victor. "I just think you don't get something for nothing." "Have you stolen something?" asked Jennifer in a worried tone. She tilted her head, hoping to see what had prompted this line of thinking in her husband. "No," said Victor, "but I think people that have gone before us have sacrificed more than we appreciate." "You mean like the founding fathers?" asked Jennifer. Victor smiled. He turned to the bed table and picked up the mirrored keys. "What are those?" asked Jennifer in surprise. "I mean like this," whispered Victor as his eyes glowed brightly and he took Jennifer's hand. After several minutes, their eyes stopped glowing. Using the power of the divine keys, he showed her the world that humanity had escaped. In moments, she saw everything from Michael giving her the keys to the time when Victor battled the archdemon and then spoke with the Herald of Time. Tears streamed down her face, and she held Victor close. He smiled and kissed her gently. "What now?" whispered Jennifer. "I mean, now that we have the divine keys, do we tell the others? Do we form a council of 9? What should we do?" "Having divine keys shouldn't change what we do," said Victor with a smile. "No one should be relegated to a meaningless existence. Each person should use what they have been given to make life on Earth better." Jennifer smiled and nodded as Victor looked out the window into the sunlight before speaking again. We make our age a golden age. I hope that you have enjoyed this presentation of Relegated Book 3, Ultimate Sacrifice by Brett Jensen. This book was written and narrated by the author Brett Jensen. The story is copyright 2016 by the author Brett Jensen. This story represents an original work of fiction. Any similarity to persons living or deceased is unintentional and coincidental.